Excellent. Good afternoon, Vegas. I've always wanted to say that, never really had the opportunity. Tomas, we have been working together for a number of years now, which has been an absolute wild, incredible ride. You guys have gone from
It was when you were all a sub-trillion-dollar company.
yeah, we were relatively small back then. We have somehow grown to a little bit bigger now, and so have you. This is the exciting thing, the journey that we've been on. You guys, relatively modest 14 million Series A round a few years ago, and then a few months ago, 145 million Series B. I'd love to, hear a bit about what you've seen change in the market in that time, and how you've found the solutions that you guys have worked on around causality has really lit some light bulbs above CMOs' heads.
Well, I think the entire goal of Alembic originally was to turn marketers into storytellers again. We'd been so focused obsessively on the programmatic side of the house, which I think we've had great strides in, right? And with those strides in programmatic, I think one of the things that got lost in the shuffle was storytelling and brand to a certain extent. And so we had, we always talk, NVIDIA, we worked with you for a while, and we always talk about how do you solve unsolvable problems. And the contemplation that you could literally actually truly understand down to a dollar level what brand and storytelling and advocacy and everything among your customers does was not considered possible. There were tools for triangulating roughly around it, but even then, I'd never spoken to a CFO who actually bought off on it. And so our opinion from the early days was, well, maybe we're just not trying hard enough. Maybe it requires exponential amounts more data, right? We're trying to solve, a problem that requires a jet engine, right, with a pedal bike.
And do you think that, one of the realizations that's happened amongst the customers and users that you speak to is all this amazing stuff is happening around the world of technology and AI? It's like, well, there are problems here that should now be solvable. And people are actually open to listening to, a solution to something, which isn't just a language model. It's actually deep mathematics, the sort of work that you guys do. That's actually like, okay, we can now, and I think in the words, I want to steal a quote from Gulen, CMO at Mars, we can use mathematics to unlock creativity.
Oh yeah, and I think that is the key. Is we live in a world now where we have to reevaluate what is the art of the possible, what can actually be done, and you have to think differently while doing that. Before, a lot of the things that you'd hear from things, maybe we don't have enough historical data for that, or, we don't have access to that data set, or we can't understand this type of modality, right? We can't be able to do that. Well, is that actually true, or do we actually have to compute around it? And I think that what we hear from customers over and over again is that their gut is often right. They're like, I know this works. I know my customer cares about this thing. It's very hard to prove that mathematically. And one of the things that we came out with is, if you think about the realms of AI, you'll hear about often drug discovery, weather prediction, nuclear simulation, things like that still exist in the space. We're bringing that type of technology down into the enterprise. Whereas you also have the LLM side of the house that's made great strides. And so I think that the modern realm of compute and everything else has a bevy of options that have just never been explored.
It's one of the fascinating things that's very common for NVIDIA over the last, I'd say, maybe 20 years is you see in part of an industry, companies starting to figure out very, very hard problems. And it helps push a realization to the rest of a market and bring, a rising tide lifts all ships sort of scenario. We saw this, broadly with computer vision. That's, a lot of that started in the sports industry, went into robotics, autonomous vehicles, and now, the incredible things happening in that space. You mentioned healthcare, right? Again, the work that we've done with pioneers in healthcare and bio and drug discovery is now broadly, affecting, the whole.
You did a lot of work in 3D films too, right?
Well, yeah, and that goes back 30 years and really pushing the boundaries of what can be done with graphics and computing, and now seeing that intersection of graphics, accelerated computing, and AI come to life for so many different reasons, like digital twins and simulation of many different things. it's always fascinating seeing those moments in time where a penny drops for not just one company but for industries. And I think, obviously the advent of modern AI, we work with, NVIDIA is the only AI company in the world that I think works with every single AI company. But I think what you guys are doing is slightly different from what everyone's thinking in most mindsets of it's an LLM, it's an agent, it's a transformer model. But it's like, no, you guys are actually building a fundamental data understanding layer that can power lots.
Yeah,
of
we really build a
right?
world model if you think about it.
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the more interesting things we ended up doing with our technology is I have both a technical background and I was a CMO for a long time. And one of the things that was always very, very difficult is anytime you're talking to your analytics team, whoever, it's like, hey, we have to have domain expertise. And marketers often have to do what's called putting together a taxonomy, right, for their measurement model. You have to be able to know what channels you care about, and you have to basically make a guess, right? What is important, because I can't measure everything. Well, then we took the approach that was a little bit different. We're like, well, instead of having to guess and update this taxonomy and having humans try to know where everything's at any point in time, what if we actually threw enough compute at it that we literally brute forced every single connection? We bring in literally all the data. We calculate every single connection that could possibly exist causal-wise. And then we force a model to be built over trillions of connections, literally now. That's basically a world model that we can learn off of. It's their marketing world. And the interesting thing that happens when you do that is that you don't make any assumptions and you always find wonderful surprises, right? Almost always the gut validated, but we find that marketing is monstrously undercredited for a lot of stuff that's actually theirs. And the reason is because it's goes unseen, right? Because they don't even know it's happening. It's just a weird side effect that they didn't even realize. Now, when we brought foundational level models of compute, these huge systems to be able to do this, a lot of people thought we were crazy at first.
Well, this is a really important thing to just make sure everyone understands is the NVIDIA NVL72 SuperPod system that you guys are working with now. When you see these systems in the news, it's normally Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepL that are leveraging them.
There's like literally any one of them that deploys. Well, any one of those systems that deploys is the top 100 fastest computers on the planet. Every time it comes off the production line, pretty much, basically, right? And so when that occurs, you're like taking, gigawatts of power, and then people look at you and go, wait, you're using that for what? Marketing?
Well, and it's an incredibly powerful thing as well, because it's very unlikely that any CMO in the world is going to go and get the budget to go and buy a multi-tens of millions of dollar supercomputer to potentially prove causality. You had to put years and years of science and effort in, and to justify, getting it. And now you're able to give that service to CMOs without them having to go and build a small computer and nuclear reactor to do it.
Yeah, well, I think that the thing that matters to me a lot is that no customer we have can ever share model or information with another customer. The way our mathematics works, that's not possible. And that's by design. And when I think about the world in which LLMs are coming to say, oh, LLMs are going to do all of marketers' jobs, et cetera, I actually don't think that's true at all. I think that they're going to be a big help, right, in productivity. I think they're going to let us test faster. But I think that human taste runs so quickly that it will not, it'll just be another remixing system, just like we did with when digital video or digital audio hit home studios, right? So form factor will go down. But one of the interesting things that I often think about is, there are all these agents, and agents can be either a human or a machine or an API. Everybody's talking about them. But we're very interested in providing what is actually the cause and effect of things. What happened in the past? What is the attribution of that? And then now, releasing this quarter, we're actually predicting out what will happen in the future, right? That's what we need. It takes a lot more horsepower to do that. But each one of those models is built custom as a piece of intelligence for the individual company it's built for. And when we do that, that actually provides insurance against the LLM world being like, you will have information that you could either feed to an LLM or an agent system or use yourself that will never be available to anyone else. And it can augment the capabilities so you have less commoditization risk because of everybody, nobody with ChatGPT could do the same strategy.
And this evolution of adoption of new technologies over the last 3 or 4 years, I think, especially in marketing and advertising, we saw a lot of work around generative AI and image and video creation. We then saw a lot of work around building agentic platforms and leveraging transformer models. And I think in order for those things to all end up being really successful, that flywheel needs to be connected.
And yeah, I mean, if you don't know what it did, you can't bring it back around.
You need to tell these things what to do with a layer of accuracy that your sort of work is providing, and doing that in real time, right?
Yeah, the hardest thing from the recent, we're actually deploying we've been working with NVIDIA on an entire new technology stack from the ground up, where we have these large supercomputes. We have 3 supercompute clusters coming up. So we have the original in Virginia, we have San Jose, and then we have a second Virginia cluster coming up. Along with that, one of the things about those clusters is you want to run big jobs on them, right? Like think like you want to do the first building of the world model initially. But then if you want to render the intelligence in real time, be able to actually do it, my dream has always been be like, could I take a shopping cart? I want to be able to walk into somewhere and be like, give me, if I did one more set of TV, these 6 influencers, this set of campaigns, could I hit a button in that shopping cart and it could tell me what I would get out of it, right? Could I actually do that in real time? We now can just start doing that in our alpha state stuff. But what we had to do is we actually are now delivering, as of this week, we're now delivering the front end experience for customers directly off of GPUs from the front end. So when we're interacting with the Alembic platform, it's not going to a web server. It's literally rendering live off of GPUs when you're asking for a question. And I think that will move us forward very quickly. But we had to build an entire architecture that we've been talking about for what, like months, just to be able to achieve that. Because you had to have these systems on the edge, right, to be able to service that. So there's a whole fleet of GPUs being installed on the front side. We jokingly call the big mainframes GRU, and we call the little machines minions, right? So we have this GRU and minion architecture.
Yeah, the exciting thing for NVIDIA, no matter what industry we're talking about, is working with companies who are solving incredibly hard problems, working with us on a deep technical level, leveraging the work that we put in to build libraries and accelerators at a foundational level, and applying them to very specific problems that can affect work, especially in marketing. It's a horizontal solution, right? It's across every industry.
Yeah, and I think we over the last 18 months, we've actually rewritten our entire platform in NVIDIA's closest to native language, which I say is C++ CUDA that you often hear about. And so all of our stuff is written at the low level on chips. In fact, we wrote a database, basically a key value store, that literally sits on the GPU itself. Because when we first tried to deliver this experience in real time, where you could literally like put in a shopping cart or literally real time change marketing mix models, that type of vibe, we literally could not grab the data quickly enough from a regular data structure. So we had to actually write the data system to sit on the GPU itself as well. And so we've built a lot of foundational technology. We're not like shake and bake, hey, throw some Python together, right? And I think that co-development matters so deeply, and somewhere you can't get really from any other vendor I've seen besides you all.
Well, I mean, it's just how NVIDIA works with developers. I think it's a hard thing for some companies sometimes to understand, is how to work with NVIDIA, whether you're a developer or an enterprise or a platform company.
Where you want exponential returns. NVIDIA doesn't want to do 1x or 2x better, right? We're like, how do we make it 1,000x better?
Yeah. That excites us. And also, we don't want to build the end result, right? We want people who are going to build the application, create markets and ecosystems. It's why we have 7 million developers around the world who work with our platform. It's not 7 million people who work for NVIDIA. It's 7 million people across 20 different industries, 30 different domains of science, universities and labs all around the world, to help eventually create companies like yours, which is really exciting.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think when you develop for NVIDIA hardware or GPUs in general, you have to think very differently. And I think that actually marketers need to think about this new way of the world. We often say things in computers are often serialized, right? They happen one after the other. So imagine you have a to-do list, right? I have to-do list item number 1, check it off, to-do list item number 2, right? I'm going to go in order and, knock down this list of things. That's very much more how like uh, CPU works, right? A CPU is like you could give it a whole bunch of lists, right? But it still has to go in a list. It's got to be in order. When you work with a GPU, it's like everything everywhere all at once, right? Literally, can you do every single action at the exact same time? It kind of warps your brain when you think about it like that, because you'd go, but wait, doesn't this thing have to happen before this other thing? Right? Isn't there a like sequence? And you're like, well, does there have to be? And so just you have to actually look at the way you even view the data in marketing. Can you actually do everything in parallel? Right? Do you actually have to wait for one thing and then the other? And then can you feed that through the technology? That's making that leap in thinking, right? Is really what's going to be required for marketing to move into the agentic side. I think often our thought process gets governed by this very static structure.
I think what really excites me with this work and the success and the results of it is it takes us beyond some of the relatively obvious initial use cases around modern AI, what's happened in the last few years, and exposes a truth, which is to solve the hardest problems, the technology level that's required, whether it's a marketing, creative use case, or whether it's healthcare, robotics, is incredibly hard. And
the number of times I've been up at 3 a.m. swearing at the machine in front of me, you have no idea.
But the good thing is that it's you doing that and not every marketing team in the world, right? So there's this ecosystem of companies, including you guys, who are going to start solving these hard problems with the access to the compute and the software and the libraries that we give out and collaborate with you on.
Well, the thing I'm the most excited about with the new monstrous levels of compute that we're bringing up, right? These other two clusters. To give people an idea, it's like, compared to our previous stuff, we now have 32 times more compute than we previously had access to. And what we can do with that is, what that means for the marketer is that we can actually start predicting things. Whereas before we were looking at attribution, right? Just like, what could you do? Now we could be, based off that attribution, what can we actually predict would be the best next action? And then that could feed into agents and all the rest of this stuff. But it's, I've always felt that marketing got a little bit of the short end of the stick when it came to technology. We would be the last person to be handed the scraps of something. It drove me mad, right? Be like another vendor coming in and be like, oh, do you know what? We just added actions this quarter. And you're like, okay. I'm saying that, how do we actually transcend that? And we've now worked with some customers where we can actually make them the most sophisticated analytics organization in the entire company, right?
And I think it's possible through having that mindset of building the future, operating at that intersection of art and science,
listening to customers,
listening to what people need.
My favorite customers hand me my ass every day.
Yeah, which is good. And also just being able to cut through like an industry context to look at the mathematical problem that's trying to be solved. That's an incredibly powerful thing that you guys have been doing. And I'm certainly looking forward to continue collaborating with you guys and on working on that problem together.
Yeah, and I think that like we said, I mean, the goal would be is, where's the future where the storytelling is the thing that we are focused on and thinking about, and the execution, the understanding of the channels and the movement of that is there. How do we mix art and science to that point? And I think that's something both of our companies agree on, is that the mixture of art and science is the human experience and the way we want technology to move. We don't want one to be forgotten ever.
And you guys are a great example of how, leveraging the libraries, the SDKs, the tools that NVIDIA builds up, and turning them into products through that artistic application of science that you and your engineers do, is an incredibly powerful thing. We're going to get pulled off in a second. So, it's a great partnership, and hopefully this hasn't been too technical a talk for 1 o'clock on a Tuesday at CES.
That's what happens when you let the nerds on stage.
Well, yeah, but it's an important thing that this is a technology show, and we think these problems are going to be solved. But it takes a nerd and a supercomputer maybe to do it sometimes.
Thank you all for the time.
Thank you.